Hello and welcome. We are so excited that you are here today, joining Apex Benefits and myself for the How to Quit Hitting Pause on Your Goals webinar. So my name is Rachel Schoening, Kinetiq Health Specialist and Certified Health Coach. Again, so excited that you are here today. A couple of housekeeping items just to make sure that you guys have access to and know kind of what you need for this webinar. First off, the presentation along with any handouts or some activities maybe that we're going to do today are listed under the handouts section over on your, on the right of your screen. You should have a little panel, I guess, and you'll see handouts. You can open those up there. If you have any specific questions for me, I encourage you to put those in the question box. No one else is going to see those questions but myself, so go ahead and put those in there. I'll try to answer them if I can while we're here during the presentation, but if I need to, we can answer them at the end or just shoot you an email, at the conclusion of the presentation. Finally, I guess the last thing is that I do have a couple of polling questions, just a fun way to get you guys kind of engaged and really kind of get into the PowerPoint and this presentation with me. So let's go ahead and pull open the first polling question here. Give me a moment while I launch it for you guys. All right. So you guys should see on your screen a polling question. I'm hopeful that you guys can see it here. The question is, did you set a New Year's goal, a resolution, or an intention? So I'll give you guys about 20-30 seconds here to answer. There is no right or wrong answer. Again, I'm just curious to know who we have joining us today. Awesome. Okay, so it looks like we've got some yeses and we've got some no's. So again, no right or wrong answer. I'm just excited that you guys are here today because we will be kind of touching on maybe if you have set some goals, or maybe you've set some goals in the past and you haven't been as successful as you would have liked with them. We want to talk about how we can be maybe a little bit more successful and how we can quit hitting pause on our goals. So let me close this polls for you and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Hopefully you all can see my presentation here again. Let me double check and make sure that it's open. If you can't see my presentation, please put that in the question box. Otherwise, I will assume that you can see me and you can see my presentation. So let's go ahead and get started and jump in here. First thing is how many of you can relate to this statement? It's I'll start or resume my goal when maybe the new year happens, or maybe the holidays are over. Maybe it's I'll start resume my goal when the kids are back in school, or the kids are sick, or work slows down, right? If you're like me, I have said this many times, and often as humans, we've gotten really good at this. And this is what I like to call, or what's been coined, kind of the pause button mentality. And while sometimes when it comes to our goals, we do need to press pause, and that's okay. That's not the point of this presentation. I'm not saying we cannot ever press pause, but oftentimes we're pressing pause when maybe we don't necessarily have to. So today, again, we're going to discuss some ways to overcome this pause button mentality. If you guys want to put in the question box for me, I'm trying to get you guys all engaged here with me. What are some barriers that you've experienced, or maybe you are currently experiencing, that are preventing you from sticking to your goals? For me, that's maybe this feeling that, oh my gosh, I have too many things that I need to change or I want to change. I want to change them all at once. So again, it's very overwhelming for me, and often I just, boop, okay, I'm giving up because it's just too much. Well, maybe for you, there's not enough time, or, ooh, I see cold weather. Yes, that's a good one. That is a big one there. Timing, maybe money, motivation. Very, very good. Those are a lot of great examples, right, of true barriers that get in our way. And honestly, experiencing these things is perfectly normal. And I want you to say that to yourself and truly believe it. If you are experiencing this or you have experienced it, know that you are not alone. And again, I've got a whole list here of people saying a lot of the same things. Like it is just truly tough. And there are barriers to sticking to our goals. So that's why, again, I'm so happy that you're here today, because we're going to be discussing tools and strategies that are practical that you can use to overcome this, overcome this or even some of the barriers in your life. So for today's agenda, we're going to be talking about first understanding that pause button mentality, and this term was coined by Precision Nutrition. This is a coaching certification kind of program. So again, I want you to know that this is credit goes to them for this, this thought. But this is something that can be applied to a lot of goal and habit and behavior change that we are maybe working on in our lives. So we want to understand that. We want to understand why we're hitting pause on our goals. And then we'll discuss those tools and strategies that are going to help you to maybe quit hitting pause as often maybe as we have in the past. So to understand this pause button mentality, I've got here a graph. And you can probably look at it and see it and maybe understand it, but I want to explain it to you a little bit more. So on this graph, you've got progress on the y-axis and time on the x-axis. So when we are setting new goals, new habits for ourselves, and say it's, the brand new year started off, goals are looking good. What we see is that progress line increases, right? We're making progress. It's going up. But say right here, we get to the top, life throws us a curveball, something totally unexpected. It takes up maybe time, it takes up money, maybe it takes or reduces our motivation. So what happens? Our response, we got to hit pause. I say, wait, okay, I can't take care of this right this moment. I have to take care of maybe this curveball that has popped up unexpectedly in my life. So what we see is that whole time while we've paused, our progress is declining. And oftentimes it maybe goes back to almost zero, almost that point where we're starting new again. So over time, when we are continually making progress, hitting pause with because of a curveball, then progress is decreasing. We just see this continuous up, down, and that can be very frustrating, right? You don't feel like you're getting anywhere. Maybe you feel upset with yourself, and I think I've seen a lot of people blame themselves, for this. And again, it's just it's tough, and I can totally relate to any of you guys who have felt this way, because I have been there. And so again, that's why I'm so excited that we're going to talk about some tools today. But again, this is what progress looks like when we are continually hitting pause on our goals. So why are we hitting pause? Well, first and foremost, relief, right? With those unexpected curveballs, sometimes it just takes an emotional toll on us, and even doing daily tasks, maybe daily mundane things, seem like a lot of work. So when we are trying to establish a new habit or a new behavior, trying to do those new things, it's already hard, let alone here's this curveball, right? So it's made it even more difficult for us. So what do we, as humans, what do? We seek relief. So we hit pause on our goal in hopes to maybe later kind of start fresh when we find that a magical, elusive right time again. But unfortunately, and maybe you can relate, maybe some of you are like, heck no, I've found that magical, elusive right time. But oftentimes, again, that elusive right time, it doesn't always exist. Or if it does exist, it doesn't exist for as long as we would hope it to. So what are we really struggling with here? Well, the point is, or the thing is we're getting really good at that skill of pausing and waiting for that perfect moment to begin again, right? We know that when it comes to any type of skill, we maybe heard the term practice makes perfect. When we practice something on a regular basis, we get better at it. We get better at it. And so essentially that's what's happening here. We're getting really good at, let's hit pause, because that's what we know, right? And again, it's nothing that you've done wrong. It's again a way that our body is trying to protect ourselves in the midst of uncertainty, or maybe even, again, just life's unexpected curveball. So what we're not doing, because we're getting really good at that skill of pausing, is we're not practicing that skill of sticking to our goals in the middle of real life, right? Real life, it's always going to happen. It's always going to be here. As much as I wish, and I think maybe a few of you may agree with me, I wish life was perfect in the way that, I would hope it to be, or the way that I want it to be. I think a lot of us would maybe deal with I guess maybe we just wouldn't have as much anxiety, depression, and those sorts of emotional struggles that we have if we had a little bit more control over how life went. But again, remember, life, it happens, and we unfortunately don't always have control over it. So how can we overcome this? Probably like, great, Rachel, you're probably going to say something about willpower or motivation. And no, I don't want you to have to worry about that, right? Because that is not what we're going to focus on here today. What we're going to focus on is skill. And we know that by repetition and practice of a specific skill or tool or strategy, we can get better and we can overcome that. So I know, again, that motivation is a big one for a lot of people that struggle with that. But stay tuned. We'll be kind of talking about how we can overcome maybe bouts of lower motivation with a couple tools and strategies. So probably one of the biggest parts of this presentation, that and something that I hope you can take away from this presentation, is small changes add up over time. Now, maybe if you guys are familiar with this book, but in his book Atomic Habits, author James Clear shows how you can, how helpful even small gains can be. So if you've never heard of this book, you have no idea. James Clear is basically a habit forming specialist. That's what I like to call him. He's written probably, I don't know how many books that he's written, but he's most known for this Atomic Habits book, which is all about how to be successful in building habits, building, behavioral change. So if that's something you're interested in checking out, I encourage you to check out your local library or even bookstore and reading that. But I want to read an excerpt from this book, which will better kind of explain this chart here that you see on the right. So what he says is, improving by 1% isn't particularly notable. Sometimes it isn't even noticeable, but it can be far more meaningful, especially in the long run. So the difference a tiny improvement can make over time is astounding. So here's how the math works. If you can get 1% better each day for 1 year, you'll end up 37 times better by the time you're done. On the other hand, if you get 1% worse each day for 1 year, you'll decline nearly down to 0. So what starts as a small win or a minor setback can accumulate into something much more. So essentially what he's saying here is, just by aiming to be 1% better every day, you can be 37% better by the end of the year. So take a moment and kind of think about that. I think diet culture, just the industry in general, the world has told us we need to, when we make changes, we need to go big or go home. And I feel like that needs to be thrown to the wayside, thrown in the trash can, because life happens. And honestly, studies show, math shows here, that small changes add up over time. So we don't need to do those big, those big changes or do all 100 changes at one time, right? It's those small things that we do that add up and make us better, again, over time. So keep that in, again, the forefront of your mind, because you'll probably see this pop up in some of our tools and some of the strategies that we talk about. So some life application here. But let's move on to some of those tools and those strategies and how we can use those to help us be successful with sticking to our goals. So I'll go through here in the next slide, next couple slides, each tool and strategy, but to give you an overview, we've got the Precision Nutrition Volume Knob, BJ Fogg's Tiny Habit Formula, and then simply planning and strategizing. So for the first one, let's chat about the Precision Nutrition Volume Knob. So this is something that I've used with quite a few clients, myself even, and I've found a lot of success with it. So oftentimes, remember, when we do start with our goals or we create new goals, we maybe tend to have, maybe not all of us, but maybe we tend to have this all or nothing thinking where I have to do, my goal perfectly or not at all, right? And oftentimes that all or nothing thinking puts us in a bad place. So if that's something else I could throw in the trash, I'd put that in the trash bin too, right? It's that all or nothing thinking that can get us in trouble. Because again, remember, it's those small changes that add up over time. We don't have to do everything, all the big things all at once, all the time in order to be successful. So with the Precision Nutrition Volume Knob, instead of pressing pause, let's think about our health goals or any goal or new habit that we're thinking about for that matter as having a volume knob. So depending on the day that you're having or what's going on in the weekend, let's take that volume knob and maybe turn it up or maybe turn it down, depending on what we're ready or willing to do for that day. So what you can see here is we've got a little volume knob. It's got 10 boxes, and each box represents a different type of maybe a goal for movement. So what I like to do with coaching clients is, think about what is that overarching goal that you have for yourself that you're working on. Then from here, we want to fill in each of these boxes. So one is going to be, what is the least that I can do to continue making steps towards my goal? And let's put that here in this number 1 box, where number 10 is maybe what's the absolute most that I can do, right? I'm having a great day. Nothing can bring me down. Maybe that's an intense daily training for my tactical or military job. And from here, once we have 1 and 10, then you can fill out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and kind of fill those in as an in-between. So this way, depending on how you're feeling that day, what's going on that day, you're able to look at your dial, you're able to turn it up or turn it down and choose which, which part of helping you get to your goal is going to be realistic for you to do for that day. So this allows you, again, not to hit pause. You don't have to hit pause. You can still make progress towards your goals, but you don't have to have this all or nothing. Here's my goal. Oh, I didn't do it. Now I failed, right? So what I love about this principle here is you can apply it to any type of any type of goal. So maybe it's nutrition. As you can see here, someone's filled this out. Maybe my number one is, the least I can do is replace just one meal with one less processed one. And maybe their number 5 is, I'm gonna try for protein with each meal today. And again, you can design this wheel to match your needs and what is most realistic for you. And again, there's no right or wrong way. I hope no one's dial is going to be the same, or we don't copy anyone else's dial or create a dial that we think it should look like this because society or culture has told us it needs to look this way. But again, this is something that you can do and you can create to help you meet your personal goals. So same thing here. You can see it can be applied to almost anything: stress, nutrition, movement. Oh my gosh, there's so many different ways that you can utilize this volume knob. And maybe if you feel like 1 to 10 is way too much, maybe you just make yourself a new dial and it's just 1 to 5. Maybe that's more realistic to you. That's okay too. I encourage you to do that. Again, use this dial in whatever way feels realistic and helpful for you. But again, it's the premise here that we are kind of nixing that pause button or removing that pause button and just adjusting that volume knob and for what we're willing, ready, and able to do with today's circumstances. So that is strategy number 1. I do want to give you guys about 30 seconds to a minute here just to think about what your 1 and your 10 would be. Now, if this is something that you want to, I encourage you to complete and fill out maybe later after today's presentation. There is an empty handout, an empty dial here in your handouts. It is let's see here, it's labeled the Precision Nutrition Pause Button Mentality Infographic. If you go to the very last page of that, you will see a big blank dial, but you can fill out, on your own time. But for right now, I encourage you just to think about, for about 30 seconds here, what would be the most that you can do and what would be the least that you can do. Awesome. Okay, so hopefully we had enough time maybe just to think about those. Again, I encourage you to complete that dial maybe after today's presentation, but I'm going to move on to strategy number 2. Now, I want to try not to get too much in the weeds here with strategy number 2, but this is BJ Fogg's tiny habit formula. And to understand his tiny habit formula, I want to briefly review the Fogg behavioral model. And BJ Fogg is a well-known behavioral scientist. Also really another good guy to maybe Google, check out. He has books, he has lots of resources and just everything you can imagine about, making changes, behavioral changes, or setting goals. He's another good guy to reference. But the Fogg behavioral model in its essence is this B map here, right? So this stands for behavior equals motivation plus ability plus a prompt. So motivation, ability, and a prompt all have to converge together and happen in order for a behavior to happen. So any behavior that you do, there is motivation, there's an ability, and there's a prompt that come together to make that behavior happen. So again, motivation is that desire to perform that behavior. Ability is the capacity to make or do that behavior. And then the prompt is the cue that initiates the behavior. So if you're looking here at this chart, you'll see that we've got motivation here. When motivation is high, what you'll notice is that we're likely able to do things that are harder, right? with ease. However, if our motivation is middling or our motivation is low, we need to scale back the ability, right, or that capacity to perform that behavior. So in order for a behavior to succeed, if our motivation is low, it must be something, we got to make it easy for ourselves to do, right? So it's great when we have high motivation, right? Because we can do hard things, but we have to realize when motivation is low. That's normal, right? Motivation ebbs and flows, much like any other feeling. But if we do feel motivation is low, that's a good point for you to say, hey, okay, I think I need to take a step back and make the behavior or goal that I have a little bit easier for myself. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit, and it'll make a little bit more sense. But essentially, Fogg believes that to create successful behavior change long term, we have to take those baby steps. And those baby steps are what help to build our confidence in ourselves, and also our ability to do these new habits or these new things that we have set for ourselves. So by starting small, we're not having to rely on having high motivation. We can have low motivation and still be able to make change or establish a new habit or behavior, right? And by doing that, we are learning to make things a little bit more doable for ourselves, but also help improve our self-efficacy and help us just to feel more successful about ourselves. So over time, those small behaviors, those small things, they will actually add up to help us to be able to complete more challenging or bigger goals later on. So I know that was kind of a lot there, but this brings me to BJ Fogg's tiny habit formula. So there is a little tiny habit recipe card in your handouts section. If you want to print that out, I encourage you to check that out. But this is his recipe. So what BJ Fogg believes anytime you are creating a new habit is you want to tie it to an anchor moment or a prompt, right? It's that prompt that we saw in the model. So tying this new habit to an existing routine in your life that will remind you to do the tiny habit or that behavior. So for example, let's see, an example would be, how do I get up every morning and just know I need to brush my teeth? Well, for me, it's the alarm goes up, the alarm goes off, and I get out of bed. That is an already existing routine for me. It happens day in, day out, and I know that, hey, my next step for me is to brush my teeth. So the prompt or that anchor moment is the alarm that goes off and me getting out of bed. So tying tying that new habit to an existing routine can be very helpful in helping you to establish a new habit. So next, we want to, discuss what is that behavior, what is that habit that you're trying to put into place. Whatever it may be, I want you to take that and I want you to slash it up and make it really, really, really small, right? We want it to scale it back to be super tiny and super easy. And a good example of this, and I've heard BJ Fogg use this example, and it always sticks in my mind. He had a client maybe once who wanted to be more consistent with flossing their teeth. So what they worked on was, okay, hey, instead of flossing all of our teeth, let's work on flossing just one tooth. Now you're probably like, that sounds really ridiculous. However, this, right, making those baby steps, making it so tiny that it's almost too easy to do, again, helps build confidence in ourselves. And it's those baby steps that come together, they add up, that help us later on to do more challenging tasks. So by doing, by making that behavior very tiny, very easy, very doable, you'll see later on, hey, I can floss more than one tooth, no problem. That will be so easy for me. So again, break that down, especially if you are struggling with low motivation. Break that goal down and practice that tiny behavior. And then finally, celebrate. So celebrate, whatever it may be, to create a positive feeling inside yourself. So maybe it's you say hooray, or maybe you repeat a mantra to yourself saying I am successful or I am smart. And it can be silly. Again, it doesn't matter what it is, but this recipe for creating habits or behavior change can be really successful if you do tie that behavior to a prompt or an anchor moment. You make that habit really small so that it is very easy for you to do, and then you also celebrate that success. So that's strategy 2. Strategy 3 here is, actually, I encourage you guys, we won't have time to practice this today, but I encourage you to grab the handout, the Tiny Habits recipe card handout, and fill out one of these if this is something that's of interest to you. But the third strategy here is let's strategize and plan. So oftentimes, we already know that stuff's going to pop up in our life, right? It's inevitable. It happens. So I encourage you to anticipate and plan for those. And a lot of times I like to ask my clients this, but you can ask yourself this. What's likely to get in the way of what I hope to accomplish? What's going to get in the way? Maybe it's the kids' sports practice is getting rescheduled, or it's switching times or switching locations. Anticipate that it could happen. Maybe it's something in the past that's already happened. Anticipate. And then question number 2 is, what is something that I can do today to help me keep going when I face those obstacles, right? So if that does happen, that obstacle does pop up, or that barrier does pop up, I have a plan for it. And I know that if it were to happen, here's my plan B. Here's what I can do that's going to continue to help me make steps toward my goal. So a lot of these strategies, it just takes 5 to 10 minutes of thinking about. Maybe pull out a piece of paper, write down your goals, thinking about what's maybe likely going to get in the way, what can I do differently? It's going to help me to overcome that barrier. And if I am struggling with some lower motivation, how can I break this goal down or use this dial, the volume dial, to help me be successful? So as a recap for today, continually hitting pause on our goals, we know often leads us to very little progress. We're getting frustrated. We're getting really good at that skill of hitting pause and waiting for that perfect moment to begin again. But by practicing that skill of sticking to our goals in the middle of real life, we can overcome that pause button mentality. We have some tools and we have strategies that can help us to overcome that. So remember, small changes add up over time. And remember the precision nutrition volume knob, BJ Fogg's tiny habit formula, and also taking the time to strategize and plan. So I have one final polling question for you guys. I know we're a little over today. If you need to hop off, that's okay. Let's see here. I'll launch this poll for you. So the question is, which tool or strategy will you implement to help you stay on track with your future goals? So hopefully that's sharing. All right. Looking like we've got maybe a couple combination of some of the tools and strategies. Maybe some people are, hey, I just want to try out one thing at a time. That's good. Maybe you still need to do a little bit more research. That's okay too. I encourage you to, check out these, maybe read some of those books, or check out some of those authors that we discussed today, and learn a little bit more about building habits, building behavior change, and again, how to be successful. So go ahead and close that for you guys. Thank you so much for your participation here today, guys. I hope that we learned a few things. Maybe we have some tangible tools and strategies that we can take away, and maybe we can help, they can help us to make some changes. But if you guys have any specific questions for me, go ahead and put those in the chat. I'll do my best to answer those here now or later. But again, I just want to thank you guys for your time today. I'm so appreciative. I hope that you guys join us next month for our next presentation here. But in the meantime, have a great rest of your week and a great weekend. So thanks again, guys. Bye-bye.